to Leslie and welcome, because you're from South Africa and with a remarkable background, but you're now working in Shanghai as Vice President of the New Development Bank, and you've been through banking, through Goldman Sachs, through Barclays, and through several other incarnations, but here you are now in the PRC for this bank. What about what you've achieved and how you've done it?
Thanks very much, Nick. Look, the New Development Bank is really a startup, and I was joking earlier on that I should be wearing a t-shirt and jeans like Andrew, because we are a complete startup.
What would the t-shirt say?
I think the t-shirt would say something to the effect that I hope we can preserve elements of the excitement of this beginning 2, 3, 5 and 6 years, and maybe even 10 years down the line. Because right now all of us have 6-year contracts. We are here to build this massive new development institution. However, we are starting at a phase where we're almost overwhelmed by the excitement of doing something fundamentally new.
The New Development Bank became operational on Tuesday in Shanghai.
The NDB has an initial capital of $50 billion and will fund infrastructure and development projects in member states.
It is driven by the 5 emerging powers: Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa, better known as BRICS.
金砖银行将注重发展中国家的需求，更好地尊重发展中国家的国情。
A new joint development bank, a major step to gain more influence in the world's financial architecture.
A new financial order built by the emerging BRICS economies.
The purpose of the New Development Bank is to mobilize resources for infrastructure and sustainable development projects in BRICS and other emerging market economies.
The BRICS nations represent 40% of the world's population.
What are you doing now?
I am just preparing for the day. Just arrived.
Normally you come here at about 8 or 9?
About 8:30.
8:30.
About 8:30, yeah.
Do you walk here or do you drive? Or?
No, so I drive. I live in Puxi. We're now in Pudong, as you know, in Lujajbe. So it's about 10, 15 minutes, very short drive.
Okay.
So I live nearby.
So it's a nice view, right?
Yeah. It's a very relaxing sort of view.
So you came here 3 years ago, right?
3 years now.
3 years.
Yeah.
I really wonder about your time schedule or your agenda. So you have so many meetings flying around.
We have quarterly board meetings, sometimes a little bit more.
Yeah.
And then we have audit, budget, risk committee meetings, have credit and investment committee meetings where we approve projects for the bank. Then we have finance committee meetings where we look at the pricing of these projects. Then we have our annual meeting, which is the meeting with the Board of Governors, because we work very closely with other multilateral banks, like the World Bank, have the annual meetings. We issue bonds, and we use the money we raise from the debt markets. So from time to time, we would also make use of opportunities to speak to global international investment banks like Citibank, JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs.
How do you cooperate with World Bank and AIIB?
So we work together very closely. We have about 15 strategic agreements in place with the World Bank, with Africa Development Bank, European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, Asia Development Bank, Inter-American Development Bank, and so on. All of these institutions are partners of ours. So we collaborate quite extensively, not just on projects, but also in terms of structuring our products, on our policies, on our environmental and social standards. So we share a lot of lessons because we have common objectives.
Is that helpful for you?
Oh, absolutely. Think about it. The World Bank is 70 years old, 74 years to be exact. Well, there's so much though to learn from them. But I have to say also at the same time, there's huge advantages to be new. We can simply start with, for example, cloud-based infrastructure.
Okay. Wow.
You know, we do not have huge IT departments here because everything is in the cloud.
Yeah, it's fascinating to know that to be young sometimes can be a really good advantage, right?
Yeah.
Does that apply to you? You know, to be young sometimes can be an advantage?
It's finding the balance between experience and new ideas. You know. We're very blessed to have Mr. K.V. Kamath as the president of the bank. He's a 40-year banking veteran. He's built one of the largest banks in India. For the much younger people who are in the bank, we have about a third of our staff are just over 30 years old or just under 30, asking the questions around how will blockchain affect, for example, development finance, right? What would the world look like when the physical and the virtual world are completely connected? And that is something that we find most interesting because it offers the possibility for many of our countries that have developmental challenges to skip a whole generation of technologies.
I want to know about your story, your personal, like a more personal story or your career stories. How did you end up here? To more public service?
I started my working life as a political activist, if you like. I grew up under apartheid in South Africa, and when you see the sort of discrimination, or if you live through the injustices that was apartheid, it naturally propelled me and many in my generation to be politically involved and to be politically active and to resist the system of government at the time. Marching in the streets, demanding political change. I also got arrested for as long as they want.
When?
I was detained the first time in 1985 when I was a second-year university student. I then was released after 3 months. I then was detained again in June 11th, 1986 and released June 12th, 1987. So I spent a full year in prison. I read a lot at the time, and when I was released from prison, I worked in the trade union movement, helping with wage negotiations to improve their conditions of employment and the wages of clothing workers who were incredibly underpaid. Clothing workers in general throughout the world have been exploited in quite dramatic fashion. And after that, I got a scholarship to study and did my master's in finance in London. And when I came back after my studies, I worked for the ANC. So when transition to democracy happened in 1994, many of us of my generation and people who were in the ANC then went into government to try and change the systems of government to now serve all the people in South Africa and not just serve a minority, a white minority, which was what the government was before.
I'm trying to put myself into your shoes actually, but I couldn't,
Yeah.
All this experience. Not many people can experience what you experienced. So life becomes so easy, right, after all this?
In many ways, yes, but I think, those were very challenging periods. Look, it was life and death situations for many people. I was very fortunate that, I came out of prison unscathed in many respects there. Other people were not so lucky. Large numbers of people, died in the South African struggle. Many people were tortured. It was a very important part of South Africa's history.
So what's your most passionate about right now? Like after experience all this?
In many ways, I would say that the three sides to my experience that my current role kind of brings it together, if you like. You know, my years of political activism, my time in government, and then 14 years in investment banking, both with Goldman Sachs, Barclays Capital, and Merrill Lynch.
So pretty satisfied with what you're doing now?
I do enjoy the experience of building a new institution from scratch. It was a real honor to be nominated by my government to come to Shanghai to represent South Africa here and to be part of the founding management of this institution. In 10 years' time, when I look back, or 20 years' time, when this is a very large institution, our balance sheet in 10 years' time will be in the order of about $50 billion. By that stage, we'll probably have a lot more members in the bank. It will be a very satisfying moment to look back that I was there when we opened the office.
Yeah, wow. Right, that's really inspiring. So, can you please show us around?
Okay, well, there's some parts that I can't really show you, but I'll show you the main areas. That is the President's office. And so this is where the new building is going to be of the bank. Well, this is a miniature version of that building, and it's 36 floors. But this building will has sufficient space for 2,000 people, but we won't reach that size.
Okay.
We'll probably rent out many of these offices as well to other banks, for example, World Bank, Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank, Asia Development Bank. So this could become in future a hub for the development finance institutions globally,
But really exciting, you have a building. That's really headquarters. So you were the part of the founding team of the bank, right? The logo, flags.
We literally started everything from scratch. We, when we came here, we had no email, we had no, there was nothing really. You get the feeling you're in the heart of the world of finance when you know what I mean? Yeah. Look at this tower.
That's the financial center, right? Of the world.
There's Citibank, there's just banks all over. This is the financial powerhouse, global financial powerhouse.
I wasn't asking about your prison life. I don't know if you're willing to talk share that story. Think about probably when you were in prison for that 1 year, you wouldn't expect anything you experienced after that, right? Like with your experience now. Probably back to that time you were so young and you couldn't foresee the future of yourself. But now when you're standing here, when you think about what's happening in the past, that's a really
It is quite a thought though. Look, I was very young, I was 19 when I was in prison. And the idea, what drives you in prison is the idea that there are people outside campaigning for your release. Not just in your country, but we knew that there were people internationally campaigning for our release, the United Nations, the anti-apartheid movement. So you were not just this one individual soul sitting in a cell.
So like what you're doing now, you're helping someone, but probably they don't know that, or you're trying to help, right?
That's a very good analogy. I think that is an apt way of describing it. That's right. That's right. I mean,
okay, someone helped you before, and now you just pass through that.
That's right.
The efforts to others, or
that's right.
You want to do something for others.
That's right. But I think ultimately that is what life is really about, right? It's about making a difference and using your skills, using the limited resources you have to make an impact and improve other people's lives.
I remember you told me when you had the job interview. Just really curious about.
It was just interesting that when I
just curious about
interviewed for Goldman Sachs in I think about 2000 beginning 2000 and end of 2001 I think it was.
2001, right.
I think his name was Simon Robertson. He was formerly on the board of the London Stock Exchange and was chairman of Rolls-Royce I think at the time as well, and chairman of the advisory board of Goldman. I don't think maybe he's never met anyone who's been in prison, but he was very, so we say, curious, about how someone can, enter Peterborough Court, which is the building where I was interviewed in, who spent, a year in prison. It was a very interesting discussion because it's so far from the world of finance. to be a political activist, you know what I
I
mean?
know, I know.
But it was an interesting discussion that we were.
This year, and it's my great honor to invite His Excellency Minister Liu Kun, the Honorable Minister of Finance of the People's Republic of China, to address us. Please let us welcome Minister Kun.
When infrastructure, projects in infrastructure are profitable, the private sector appears.
Is everything okay for the whole events?
Good. It's the end of our third annual meeting. It's a major milestone for the bank. We, as you know, established ourselves only 3 years ago. Yesterday we announced projects to the tune of, we have now approved $5 billion of loans, signed an agreement with the Development Bank of Southern Africa.
Yeah.
We also signed an agreement with the State Bank of India. And then we also signed an agreement with the Vice Mayor of Chongqing Municipality for a big project we'll be doing there.
So after the whole thing, will you take several days to take a rest, or maybe probably next plan is still running now?
Well, the next major event is the BRICS Summit in South Africa in July. The BRICS Summit is very important because that is an opportunity for the bank to report to the leaders, the heads of state, about what we have achieved. Ultimately, our bank is owned by the 5 governments, owned by the 5 countries. But the teams will hopefully have some time also to take a break in the next 2 days, because it was quite an intense build-up towards the annual meeting.
Yeah. Okay. Right. That's just this part of the interview.
Okay.
Oh, well done. And that's such a huge event for you guys. Well done.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay.